I think that women need to be keeping as much support around them as possible. Very often, when one of our girlfriends get into a relationship, we step back and think, well, she's got a man now, so she doesn't need us. But actually, I would argue that that's the time she does need her friends around
No,
her.
yeah.
They should be seeing what he's about too. And look out for, well, red flags, look out for amber flags, things that appear to be good things. For example, a guy comes and your partner comes and picks.
The Imani Speak Show.
Pamela, please share a little bit about your background with the listening audience.
Okay, thank you so much for having me back on again,
You're
Imani. I
welcome.
think I was on back in 2018 when I
Yeah.
released my first book, which was called Loving the Brothers. Um, it did extremely well, part one. Part two is my new book, which is called Loving the Sisters. It's taken me quite a while to find a perfect fit with a publisher, but I'm happy to say that they found me. They're based in South Carolina, called Hear Our Voice LLC, a small publishing press, and they gave me the opportunity to rewrite Loving the Brothers, a second edition,
Oh
as
gosh.
well as um, giving me the opportunity to also publish Loving the Sisters. And I'm under contract now to deliver the third book, which will complete the trilogy. Born in London, raised in London, went to local schools, and enjoyed a career spanning over 30 years working in the criminal justice system as a senior probation officer, and I retired in 2018. The books are doing extremely, extremely well, and I'm looking forward to part three of the trilogy to be released next year.
Wow. And we're going to talk about them. We're not going to give everything away because, as you can imagine, these books are amazing, and we want you to go out and get your copy. But what I'm going to ask Pamela is, I want to take you back in time, Pamela, and talk to us about when you were a child. Were you a book person? Were you into books? Is there anything you can pull from your early days that connects you to what you do now in terms of being a published author?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've always been an avid reader, so it would not be unfamiliar for anyone to see me in the my mother brought the five of us to the library. Back then, you could take out six titles at a time,
Yeah.
and we spent many a summer holidays. One of the first play schemes was at Canning Town Library, so it was a full weeks worth of being surrounded by books. Unfortunately, I didn't always relate to the titles of those books or those authors, but there were one or two peppered in there, Nigerian, British authors that I just fell in love with. And that carried on through my late teens into my early adulthood. So, books by the late Andrea Levy, Buchi Amacheta. Loved her books too. And then later, Terry McMillan and Martina Cole. I definitely have a love for British fiction,
Oh,
especially crime novels. I've
oh wow.
met Martina Cole, yeah, several times, and I just prefer those over the maybe Black American books because they are closer to what my experience is growing up in the East End.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting. And, that I always say there's this thing about, from the age of 1 to 7, a lot of the times you can pretty much connect what someone might do when they grow up. And, what I want to do is take you into, the very first time when your first book, because you've got a trilogy. And as you said, we'll talk a little bit about the book you're doing next year. But you started with Loving the Brothers. Yeah. And
That's
what
right.
kind
Yeah.
of, what made you, because it's sort of, what category would you put this in? I would say it's love and relationship and complications and what have you. What made you choose that element to write about?
I think it was mainly drawn on my experiences of working in the criminal justice system. At one point in my career, I was a facilitator on the domestic abuse program, and I heard hundreds and hundreds of stories from men who were not only perpetrators of domestic abuse, but somewhere along their background when they were children, they were also victims and survivors of domestic abuse. So that's what sparked my interest. Also, I was a student at Kingston University, and in my degree year, they were the first university to talk about domestic abuse as a global phenomenon. So we had guest speakers flown in from Australia and New Zealand and elsewhere to talk about domestic abuse, and I was fascinated from there. Hence, I put myself in the domestic abuse facility, and I also am Duluth trained, which means that I'm an expert in the field of domestic abuse, and it more or less stemmed from there. But in terms of writing about domestic abuse, I was reaching a milestone birthday and I wanted to self actualize in some way, leave a legacy. And I decided to write a book. Originally, I wanted it to be an anthology of where women who have come across, who have experienced domestic abuse, could write their stories. But there's a lot of embarrassment around domestic abuse, and it was much easier to then write something fictional but based on the cycle of abuse. So the book covers things like using economic abuse, coercion, intimidation, using emotional abuse, isolation, minimization, blaming, denying, using children, using male privilege. So I kept to those parameters in terms of trying to demonstrate the power and control that happens in coercive relationships.
Wow, very, very deep. And what I do know is it's been received very, very well by all sorts of people, all different ethnicities. And what I want to ask you, because obviously writing about domestic violence is, because I know in 2020 there was a lot going on in that they were saying that because of people being cramped in and not being able to get out, women and some men were experiencing domestic abuse. What would you say to that? And yeah, what would you say to that before I ask you the next question?
Well, I mean, one of the negative things about being in a pandemic was that for the first time, people were spending 24 hours a day in each other's company. And it gave us a window into what it must be like to be indoors with the wrong person and being in the wrong
Mm,
relationship. So we, as people who have not had an experience of domestic abuse, got to that feeling of what it must be like when you can't leave or when you can't escape for the first time. And you're right, the stats across the globe rose um, more than threefold during the pandemic. And so did the increase in homicide due to domestic abuse cases rose globally for where the victims were women and men. So we definitely, saw a lot of that. From what I've understood, a lot of women's refuges were full to capacity and had run out of space in terms of trying to keep women and their children safe. And there are several documentaries out there that support the overwhelming use of services during that time. And I know that this government also made money available to try and cope with the numbers of women who were trying to take up spaces. So, but the stats still remain, even though we're out of the pandemic, that at least two women are killed each week at the hands of their current or former partner. So it's still something that happens every single day of the week.
wow. That. figure is massive, isn't it? I mean, my gosh. And, that's supposed to be the safest place you're supposed to be with your partner. And just to hear that. But, of course, we do hear these things. You see it on social media, in the newspapers and what have you. And, obviously you've worked in a field where, when you've worked with clients and have you worked with clients directly who's committed this and what would you say has always been the trigger? Because you always hear that it's always something small or it's something that doesn't really correspond to the person's actions or behaviour. And what would you say on a psychological level that it's something that goes back? Because you mentioned earlier on that some of these people, have been violated when they were young. There was a lot of violence around them and they've just kind of, taken it with them where they've gone. What would you say to that, please,
Well,
Pamela?
yes. I've written an article for the Voice newspaper just recently, and in my research, I found that 1 in 7 children experience, or when I say children, between 0 and 17 experience domestic abuse in their lifetime, in their childhood. So 1 in 7, you're talking about lots of children who are coming through who have um, experience their mother being beaten by their father or by a boyfriend. That seems to be, quite a pattern. And children, unless they are given the correct counselling and support, will then turn into or have the capacity to turn into perpetrators themselves because that's all they've ever seen. A survivor of domestic abuse told me recently that when she experienced abuse in her marriage, it's what she's always seen. She's seen her father beat her mother, and then she was then put into a forced marriage, and her husband beat her, and it was normal. You said at one stage, when the relationship ended and she finally left him or finally escaped, that she actually missed the abuse because that was all she's ever known. And when that's all you've ever experienced, it takes a lot of skilled counselling to make you understand that this doesn't happen in every relationship. So some women will go from one domestic abuse situation to another. And I will say that there is no starting point really, but in my experience, I found very often that it starts with the use of isolation. So quite a few women tell me that, they are not encouraged to keep friends. Um, they've moved away. In some examples I've seen, they've moved country. So they've met someone, they've swept them off their feet, and they've moved to the States, for example, and then the controlling behavior starts there because there is no support network for the woman. So very often controlling what she does, who she sees, who she talks to, what she reads, where she goes, limiting her outside involvement, and using jealousy to justify her actions. I've heard of women being given a phone, a brand new phone, being told to drop hobbies, delete male friends from her social media, checking her social media. So anything that they can do to control the woman's environment tends to start with isolation, but it could be a number of other things that I've mentioned as well, reinforced by violence. So
Wow.
yes, so that's been my experience of where it can start. But I would say that domestic abuse affects every woman, and even the unborn child as well. Can you imagine when you feel threatened and how tense you must be? And that will affect the unborn child. So the unborn child tends to develops a lot slower. Miscarriage is quite frequent. Born at low birth rates, struggle to reach their milestones. School anxiety and so on, do not want to go to school because they fear what might happen to their mothers when they're not there. So, from the womb right the way through to adulthood, there are a number of things that can impact on an individual.
Wow, so much you said there, you shared with us there, Pamela. It just sounds, it just makes you feel, oh my God. And, I'm feeling, we talked about pandemic, but this is a pandemic in itself. And one of the things you said earlier on was that, people needed places to go and it was packed to capacity. What do you think? Do you feel that enough is being done for this particular issue? Or do you feel that they weigh behind what is required, what is necessary to help people who might find themselves in that position?
Well, unfortunately, by the time they get to go on the programs that the probation service offers, the violence and the abuse has already taken place. So I do think that there is a place for early intervention, perhaps at primary and secondary school, where we are taught to be better citizens, and we're taught about personal relationships and how to conduct ourselves in those relationships. I definitely think that there's a place for that in education, because we have generations and generations of young people coming through who accept some appalling behaviour and think that it is part and parcel of being in a relationship or part and parcel of being in a marriage, and that's just not the case. And when it comes to social media, um, people are quick to change their status from single to being in a relationship, not really
Mm.
knowing enough about that person to make that decision. Have you they're so quick to rush relationships into a sexual relationship that they haven't really stopped to really check that person's personality. What are they like when they're angry? What are they like when they're cut up on the road? How do they behave? And how do they talk about the women in their previous relationships? How do they talk about their mothers? These are all early red flags.
Mm.
But also, that very much puts the onus on the woman to protect herself when we're not really doing anything about educating men to be good men.
Wow. And that was going to be my next question. My next question literally was, what are the red flags? Because one of the things, that I've heard is that, it can be, like you said, just how do they deal with, and that's why it's so important to see someone in many guises, see what, like you said, what are they like on the road when someone's cutting them up? What are they like, with people that, they may deem, not that, there's, look at how they treat other people they, vulnerable people or what have you, like you said, their mother. And you're so right. You do see people, getting so excited. I've got this new partner, I've got this new partner. And they don't know a thing about the person. They've never seen them in more than one guise, maybe just going out on dates, but not kind of seeing them in other ways. What would you, I mean, education on, because relationship, that's an area that I really, really important to me, because I fell into it with the work that I do. And what I would ask you,
Yes.
how important is it for our young people in particular to really be able to kind of figure out, because there's no classes, is there, on how to, how to do relationships. And I don't know about you, but back in the day, it was a little bit different. There was more guidelines, but now everything has changed. Everything's turned on its head. And what would you say to that? Are you worried about young people, young men and young women? Because it's like both are victims, aren't they? If they find themselves
Oh,
falling into
absolutely.
this.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely say the number one thing is to not feel that there is any rush to get into relationships, especially when you're trying to find out about yourself first.
Mm,
A lot of us don't really know ourselves,
yeah.
and to give ourselves time. And I do think that the use of social media has a lot to do with this, where everything is so instant. But a successful, healthy, non-toxic relationship doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey that you have to go on.
Yes.
I use the analogy of baking a cake because I'm a cake baker.
Um,
And the process before you even get to start to put the ingredients together is making sure that everything is at room temperature, making sure that the room and the environment that you're using is clean, making sure that your equipment is working properly. And there is a whole process that goes together to make a decent cake. And I find that these days people just want to take the box cake off the supermarket shelf, add one egg, stir it, and they expect to see a really good result. And I would say that relationships don't work like that. So give yourself time and do not feel under pressure to do anything. Set the boundaries for yourself about how you want your relationship to work, and know when to walk away. When you're not being treated with respect like you should be.
And that is a big problem, isn't it? I think people are so focused on being in a relationship, making it work, making it last. They haven't even factored in, what if it's not right for me? What if it's not nourishing me? What if it's killing me? And like you said, in some cases, it's literal. And so
That's
that's
right.
another side as well, isn't it? That people need to, have as something that they have to have in their mind that, if it doesn't work, do something, get out of there as quickly as possible. And what would you say, before we talk about your wonderful books, what would you say to anyone who might be listening and who might be in a situation? It could be just starting. It could be something that has already happened. They could be seeing little signs that maybe the person has been, angry over little things, and just, their personality is showing signs that, what would you say to anyone who might be a little bit scared or a bit worried or concerned?
Well, as I said before about the use of isolation and loneliness, if your partner is telling you that you can't keep friends, you can't keep male friends who you've had for decades before you even met him, if he's calling your friends names and doesn't want them to come to your home, I think. I think that women need to be keeping as much support around them as possible. Very often, when one of our girlfriends get into a relationship, we step back and think, well, she's got a man now, so she doesn't need us. But actually, I would argue that that's the time she does need her friends around
No,
her.
yeah.
They should be seeing what he's about too. And look out for, well, red flags, look out for amber flags, things that appear to be good things. For example, a guy comes and your partner comes and picks you up from work, but then gets annoyed when the day you say, "Don't worry, I'm going for a drink with friends after work." So it might start off as being quite, I was really caring about me. He's picking me up from work, he's taking me to work, he's making sure that I'm safe. But again, it's about using jealousy to justify those actions because he really doesn't like the idea that you're having a life outside of him. So I would say keep your family structure sound, keep your family close, and keep your friendship groups close as well. And if that's a problem, then it may be cause for concern. I would encourage women who are listening to this conversation, men also, because men do experience domestic abuse, to call the National Domestic Abuse Helpline number, which is 0808 2000 247. And perhaps we'll repeat that at the end as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Pamela. So this brings me to talking about loving the sisters. And this book is beautifully written. The characters are, you can actually visualize them and see them as real people. And what I want to ask you about how you create your characters, are they based on people you know, or do they just formulate themselves? Do they just come to you as a full, person, and you just sort of write? Or are they based, or is it a bit of both, actually?
I mean, a lot of people think that the characters are mean, especially Patty
Patty,
Scott, Patty
Patty,
Scotland in the
yeah.
book. Yeah, who is 45 years old, who is a senior probation officer, who has locks. I can see where people will make those similarities, but all my characters are fictional. And one of the very first exercises I was given to by my first publisher was exactly how you put a character together. So I just got a piece of paper and I wrote down all the characteristics that I wanted that person to have, their physical characteristics. So, I knew I wanted her to be about 45 years old. I knew what complexion I wanted her to be. I knew how tall, all the physical attributes that make up a person. I wrote that down, and then I wrote down bits about their characteristics. So I wanted her to be educated to a master's level. Patty is studying for her PhD at the moment. I wanted her to be very career driven. I wanted her to have a child that was just about to go off to university. And that's how I put my characters together. Charmaine is 25 years old, mother of twins in a marriage, but feeling as though she is doing it by herself. And again, I wanted to point out that she's got natural hair, doesn't really look after herself that well because she's quite stressed out with her children, but very connected with her parents. So that's how I started to put the characters together. And Rose is in the church, five children, five girls. Her husband doesn't want to her to but her husband wants her to have more children until he has a boy. She is stressed out with her commitment to the church and her commitment to wanting her own life, basically. I wanted to demonstrate that what domestic abuse can happen to any woman, regardless of their education, class, job, family connections, money, etc., that it could happen to any woman at any time. So that's how I put my characters together, and I did so with the men in the book and any other character, principal character that I felt I wanted to have a bit more depth about. So I'm writing Love in the Children at the moment, and what I like about that is I get to make up a brand new character, and you either love this particular character or you hate them. But I've been enjoying the process of putting them together. And when I'm thinking of storylines and so, I just open up myself to my characters to tell me what happens next. So I didn't sleep very well last night because one of my characters was just telling me what happens to her on a loop, and at some point today I'll write that down.
So they start to take on a life of their own. Wow.
Oh,
Do you?
yeah, absolutely. When I was writing Love in the Brothers, I thought the manuscript was done and I sent it to my publisher. And then one of my characters says, "Oh no, I've got more to say." And I ended up adding another 8,000 words to the manuscript. My publisher wasn't impressed at the time. We laugh about it now, but at the time it was no laughing matter. So yes, the characters tell me um, what I should write down, what I should say, what the plot twist might be. One character I was going to kill off, and she said, "Nope, you're not killing me." So we argue and we go backwards and forwards. Sometimes they stop talking to me, but yeah, I have whole conversations and dialogue going on in my mind all the time.
Oh my god, I'm laughing here, but I'm trying to hold it because I don't want it to come out on the recording. But oh my goodness, that's amazing. Did you, before you got into writing, did you realise it would be like this, or are you finding that each stage, each book is kind of teaching you more and more about these characters and the plot lines and about yourself, because you're writing all this and it's amazing.
Absolutely. When I compare the first edition of Loving the Brothers to the second edition. I'm just blessed that I got the opportunity to rewrite it because I do believe that I have grown as a writer, 4 years between both books. And yeah, and I do believe that my characters have more to say. So the second edition of Loving the Brothers has 3 additional chapters. It feels more complete. And I did come in for a bit of criticism from fans wanting to know why I rewrote the first book. And I thought, well, you upgrade your phone every 2 years,
Yeah.
so why not upgrade the book? So I took advantage of the fact that my new publishers wanted Loving the Brothers also, and I rewrote the book. And I'm very, very proud of how it's come out. It's now available in a hardcover, and I absolutely think that the covers are beautiful. And
Yes.
I'm looking forward to the new cover of Loving the Children next year.
And that's what I want to ask you about the covers. How did you come up with a cover? Because they're quite distinct. So did you work with
Yeah.
the artist or, did they come up with it and you thought, wow, I love that? How did that go? Because a cover is really
I
important.
actually, absolutely, I want people to be drawn into the book by looking at the cover. Um, I actually asked 3 people that I know to design the cover for me, and I wasn't feeling any of the covers that came back. But my publisher put me on to Kevin Williams from Frank Images Limited, and Frank and Kevin and I had a phone call conversation, and I described the 3 men and where they are because the book is part based in Jamaica and the reason why they're in Jamaica. And this is what he came back with.
Mm.
So I have the brothers, the Morgan brothers, on the front cover, and they are outside a church in Negril in Jamaica. And the detail, I mean, it's an oil painting, and he even got my favourite flower at the bottom, and I never said anything like
Oh,
that to him. He
wow.
even caught that in it as well. And John Crow over the top of the church, he's got a John Crow there. Never said that to him, but I had an emotional reaction when I saw the cover and I said, this is it. I love the idea that their faces are abstract. And a lot of people have asked me why. And I said, because that's the many faces that make that particular person. And what you see is not always what you get. So, without any spoilers, I'm in love with the cover. And 2 years ago, during the pandemic, my children actually commissioned the oil painting and bought it for me. So I have an oil painting hanging in my home. Loving the Sisters have my 3 protagonists on the front. And again, I went back to Kevin Williams and said, this is the occasion. They're still in Jamaica. They're by the sea. The colour of the event is pink and white. What can you do? And this is what he came back with. And after a bit of toing and froing, because I always run it by the cover by my friends and family, some amendments was made, and I'm very much in love with this cover as well. It's watercolor, um, and it looks amazing in hardcover. I'd
Very.
love you to see it in hardcover. It looks
Oh,
absolutely beautiful. And I also have the watercolor in my office as well. So I'm excited to see what Loving the
oh.
Children, what the cover is going to look like.
Wow. I'm really, really glad you answered that question because definitely the covers are very distinct, and I love that it's abstract as well. It really, because you can see so much in abstract, can't you? It's so, you can look at it today and see one thing and then see something else. There's so much, richness in the covers. Yeah, wow. What I want to ask you, have you got a favourite character? And if so, why?
No, I don't have a favorite cover. In fact, I know who I don't like, but in
Oh,
terms of
what's
who
that?
I like, well, to date, I haven't met anybody that said to me, you know what, I really like Manly. Nobody has come back to say that to me. There are some redeeming qualities that they like about Junior, and everybody so far loves Marcus, although they do say to me, not sure about him. Is he going to turn? Is he too good to be true? And I think that sometimes that's really sad, isn't it? That even the good characters we are holding up to scrutiny. But no, I love my women for different reasons, but most of my fans are rooting for either one character or another. So, and they all change allegiance. A lot of people were into Charmaine, for example, but in Loving the Sisters, they're now rooting for Rose.
Yes.
So that's nice. And a lot of women, especially my colleagues in probation, are rooting for Patty as well. They want to see her do well and break the glass ceiling in terms of getting her promotion and so on. So yeah, people are rooting for the characters in the book. They love the other characters too. There's quite a following wanting to know what happens with Patty's mother, Veronica, and Antoinette, and a few other people, Beverly, who I've met, and one or two who even like the Rastafarian that's on the beach, who they say is very typical of some of the characters they bump into when they go on holiday.
Oh, wow. That it's so, what I love about what you've done with your books is that you're tackling a very difficult subject. And like you said, this is something that you see as a legacy for many, many years to come to help people. But you've also managed to put humour in. You've managed to, the detail that you put into the characters, how we can sort of, you kind of see them, you kind of visualize them, you kind of, like I said, you know them through people that you know. How easy is it to get all that done? Because it's a lot, isn't it? You're trying to help people to understand a difficult subject and to save themselves, but you're also able to create something humorous and fun and loving, and talk to us about that.
I think in the beginning, so 4 years ago, I wasn't certain whether people will get me. I get me and I get my writing style, but will the audience get me? So will they laugh where they're supposed to laugh, and will they cry where they're supposed to cry? And I suppose it's a risk that you take, but what I wanted to demonstrate in Loving the Brothers and Loving the Sisters is that we are not all monolithic. We don't all think the same, even though we're the same, we're all Black people. We have quirks, we have a funny side to us. So we can be serious, we can be professional, which is why I wanted my characters to have natural hairstyles. But yet still we are different. We don't agree on every single thing. And that was important to me to show that we're no different from anybody else. We've got flaws, we've got parts of us that we celebrate. A few of us want to use a few kilos. Some of us are happy where we are. I just wanted to show that whilst we are the same, we're very different in our personalities.
Yeah, and that definitely comes through with with each character. You've done a really good job in, making them individuals, and they, blending together in all the different, ways that they do. And I know obviously you've got your main characters, but your what do we call them? The people who are in the background. Because they're quite important as well, aren't they? They're the people in the background. And again, is there a lot of work for that? Or again, is it that you've got the main characters and it's, like Antoinette, she's very close with Patty, there's a lot. Yeah. Is it that you have the characters and then you think, oh, they need this person to kind of really show other sides of them? How does the sub characters, I don't know, I know there's another word for it, but I can't think of it at the moment.
Well, I think for me, I wanted to show that we do not operate in isolation. that we are supportive of each other, contrary to what the mass media may want to say. But I wanted to show that Black women are very supportive of each other, that we are loyal, and we look out for each other. So in Loving the Brothers, you see how the women come together and some of the and support each other in terms of getting help for those who are experiencing domestic abuse. So for me, the other characters in the book are just as important. And it's interesting because in Loving the Children, when I started off, I wasn't hearing from Patty, Charmaine, and Rose anymore. I was hearing from Beverly, Antoinette, and a new character that I introduced in Loving the Sisters called Adana. And what I've worked out quite quickly is that Antoinette is now telling us the story of Charmaine. Adana is telling us Rose's story. And Beverly is telling us about Patty's story. So they've now come to the fore in terms of telling us about them and who they are, and how their experiences, their previous experiences, are shaping their current thinking. Which is why I told you earlier about creating this new character called Beverly. You're either going to love her or you're going to hate her. She's just like Marmite. Um, I like the idea that these women are coming forward. So in the first strap line for the Loving the Brothers is nobody's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. And Loving the Sisters is about friendship, loyalty, and love. And no doubt a strap line will come to me for loving the children as well, because as I said, 1 in 7 children between 0 and 17 have witnessed or experienced domestic abuse in their childhood. So I wanted to cover what the fallout is for them as well, especially when safeguarding issues are raised and social services have to make decisions about our children. So I wanted to cover that in the books.
Thank you. Wow. I want to go into, you've been, because I follow you on social media. Talk to us about Baton Awards and how important are, because I know you've been receiving quite a few awards. Can you talk to us about what these are for and how did this come about for you?
Yes, absolutely. The very first one I received was a Powerhouse Global Award. I received that back in, tell a lie. Actually, it was a Lift Effects Award, and they recognise 100 women across the planet who are doing work in their community. And I got that for my 30 years of working in the criminal justice system. But in terms of book related awards, I got a author of the year in 2018 for Loving the Brothers, and in the same year I got a Black Excellence Award, author of color 2018. And I am very grateful to the people who nominated me for those awards. And fortunately, I was successful in gaining them. It just really, really helps to raise your profile when you're able to say that you're an award winning or a best selling author. And it opens up a lot more doors for you in terms of being able to get your book into particular spaces. So, at the heart of the pandemic in 2020, I get a phone call out of the blue from the organisers of the Black Award, the BLAC Awards. And it really lifted my spirits to know that someone thought that I had done a good job and nominated me for that award. In 2022, so in September, not that long ago, I attended an awards event with the Powerhouse Global Women's Award in Chobham in Surrey, and and I got an award for raising issues of domestic abuse through my books. I'm really honoured to receive that because I wasn't nominated for it. I was selected by the organisation itself, and they only recognise 40 women across the world, and I was one of them. And they treated us like royalty when we showed up for the event. And more recently, I've been nominated for a Baton Award. And I have to say, I did contact them because I thought maybe they had made a mistake, that they didn't mean me, they might have meant somebody else. Especially in the category that it's in. It's in the Paulette Wilson Campaigning Award. And I don't know if you remember Paulette Wilson, but she was one of the first people that was detained under the hostile environment, with the Windrush scandal, and fought her deportation twice. And on release, she then campaigned to help other people who were in the same situation. And unfortunately, she passed away. And a lot of people claim that it was because of the stress she was under when she was going through the whole removal process. So I'm absolutely humbled to be even in that category in the first place, which is why I rang, I contacted them to say, are you sure? Is it me that you're talking about and you didn't mean somebody else? Because I suppose I didn't really see myself as a campaigner. Um, but yeah, obviously, I am to
Yes.
be in that category, and I do use every opportunity that I can to not just promote my books, but to also raise awareness of domestic abuse, because unfortunately, there are men and women out there who still don't know what it is.
That is unbelievable, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
unbelievable. And I think you've done a very good job. And what I want to add before we go and I ask you the last question is, when I look at loving the sisters, loving the brothers, and then loving the children, it tells me that you are very much about family. Talk to us about the Black family. How important is it? Because these are all Black characters and it's all about family and whether, what's not working, what's working, how important is that to you?
To me, they are my family and my first love. And I'm blessed to be in a healthy, wonderful relationship with my husband. But more importantly, between us, we have 5 children
Wow.
and 7 grandchildren,
Gosh.
and I adore them all. And I really felt it during the pandemic when we couldn't all be together. And then when we were given a little reprieve, I did feel it when they had to leave. So they all came down for a barbecue, and when they left, I really really sobbed my heart out, because um, that's what life for me is all about, is seeing my children and my grandchildren grow and be well, and also live out their dreams, because that's what I'm determined to do, is to live out my dreams through my books. And I want them to know that anything is possible, if they're willing to work hard for it. So it's interesting that one of my sons now wants to write a screenplay.
Wow.
um, and I'm hoping that he was inspired by me. In terms of the artwork on my books, I also have a budding artist in the house. I have his artwork on the walls in my
Right.
office as well. So I'm hoping that I'm living a life where they are also inspired, that actually life is bigger than just London. It's bigger than the UK. I want my children to get the travelling bug and explore different places.
Beautifully said. And, well done to you for all the awards and everything you're doing. And I want to ask you, what does the future hold for you? Where do you see yourself in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Because obviously these books, certainly you've got more books to come after
I,
the last
I
in
don't
this.
know.
Oh, well,
I
all
don't
right.
know. I think I'm done, but I'm waiting to be
Really?
told otherwise.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so I think it's a trilogy, and that's it. but one or two characters have been talking about it being a series. So I'll wait and see what happens next. I mean, I'm excited because my podcast, the Author to Author podcast, is now in its fourth season. We have filled all the spaces for season 5 next year, and I'm now taking a wait list of self-published authors for season 6. On my vision board, I'm walking on red carpet. I don't know what that means, but I'm speaking that into existence in terms of being able to walk on red carpet. I see awards in my future. I'm just dreaming big dreams for myself. I'm hoping that somebody picks up Loving the Brothers series as a TV show or a film. It's interesting that Black Panther came out in 2018, weeks after Loving the Brothers came out, and then Michelle Obama, her first book, Becoming, came out that same year. And it's interesting, flash forward to 2022, that Wakanda Forever is out. Loving the Sisters is out, and Michelle Obama's book will be out later this month as well. So I do think I'm in good company, and I hope that their success also rubs off on me as well.
And I'm sure it will. And so the last question that I want to ask, well, it's not really a question, it's just you. What would you like to say to the listening audience? Also, please share how people can get in touch with you, how they can get the books, how they can listen to your podcast, how they can, if they're a budding writer and they want to be on your podcast. So I'm going to hand over to you and leave the last few moments with you in this segment.
No problem at all. I will say to your listeners to dream big dreams for themselves, dream beyond their current circumstances, ask for help because there is always help available. The National Domestic Abuse Helpline number is 0808 2000 247. And for aspiring authors, people who've already got their books out there, if you want to be on my podcast, contact me on Instagram at Loving the Author, and we'll take it from there. All it costs are copies of your book to give away as competition prizes, and the energy and your time. And for anyone that wants to get my books, they are everywhere at the moment. Any good bookstore, they're available online at Waterstones, Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, WH Smith's, Foyles. I saw that recently that it's there. So any good bookshop. If you want to be blackety black, you can get it from New Beacon Books. And Book and Culture, which is in Wembley Way. So there are a few bookshops where you can pick that up. And for those of you in the London Borough of Redbridge, my books are also available on loan at Redbridge Central Library, Gants Hill, Clay Hall, Fuller's Cross. Wherever the libraries are in Redbridge. And if you go into your local library, if you can't afford to buy the books, go into your local library and request a copy, and they will buy the book in.